Welcome to the State of Everything with Matthias.
With Alex and Matthias.
So be it. Have it
State
your way.
I'm going to have it my way with this Santa Monica Brew Works IPA today. It's 7.0. It's the pride of Santa Monica, California. That's my beverage of choice this evening. Yeah. So cheers to that.
Yeah, cheers. The so it's going to go down real smooth.
You're going to have to repeat that for all of our listeners. I think that was a little bit of an alien hiccup there.
Maybe it was meant to be. Maybe it was just meant to be, man. It was Coors Light. The mountains are cold, and it goes down smooth.
Well, as long as the mountains are cold, that means something is right in the universe, as they say. You know what I mean?
I don't drink it if the mountains aren't blue.
Hell yeah. That's America for you. And that's what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about America and its role in the world, baby.
Rocky Mountain cold.
Hoo-ha! Just like the pioneers of our forefathers of yesteryear marching through the Appalachians and going into the Rockies and hitting into the old Santa Fe, New Mexico, into Phoenix, the Oregon Trail, man, what a history this country has. And I know all those people, if they were here today, all those brave pioneering souls, if they saw what was going on today, I'm sure they'd be super stoked.
Cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged, baby.
That's America for you.
Yeah.
Love it. I love this country. I also love this country. I've never been there, but I'm rocking the Venezuela jacket tonight. I'm supporting the people of Venezuela. I know that they have their issues. I know they're fighting for freedom. They're fighting for their rights. And, man, I don't know what's going on. I was hoping that you would have some information on that. But, I support the people, man. I'm a man of the people. Governments that run amok and are corrupt are going to be what they are. But you know what? People are ultimately people. And I love humanity, and I'm here to express a message of hope and wonder amongst the masses. That's what we're here for.
There is always room for hope and wonder. And the Venezuelan people might require more than hope and wonder at this point.
Well,
we're in a real shit situation, and things look like they're getting to a boiling point.
Well, I saw my girl today, Representative Ilhan Omar from Minnesota. Love this girl. She was lady, woman, I want to be proper. She was grilling Elliot Abrams today, the Venezuela envoy, to basically, I know you're reading a book about the Reagan years, and he was an assistant secretary of state during the Reagan administration, but he was basically a big guy in the Iran-Contra affair. I don't know if you know about this, but basically he's a war criminal, supposedly. And Omar was pressing him about, what's that?
War criminal might be a stretch, but
continue. Well, this is what the progressive Twitter says. And this is what I listen to. So basically, Omar, this is from an article, CBS. Omar pressed Abrams about his role in shaping an interventionist American foreign policy in other Latin American countries during his first stints at the State Department. During the Cold War, the U.S. supported various violent coups in Latin America, including some against democratically elected governments. The freshman Democrat asked Abrams about a remark he made in 1993 when he called the Reagan administration's record in El Salvador a, quote, fabulous achievement. Between 1979 and 1992, the U.S. backed a right-wing military government in El Salvador during a civil war against leftist guerrillas that resulted in the deaths of more than 75,000 people, according to the Center for Justice and Accountability, an international human rights group. Omar specifically cited the massacre of hundreds of civilians by the American-trained El Salvadorian army at the El Mazote village in 1981. She said, yes or no, do you think that massacre was a, quote, fabulous achievement that happened under our watch? And then he went and said, that is a ridiculous question, accusing Omar of crafting a personal attack. And she kept grilling him, and it was interesting to watch, yeah, I mean, are these war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide? I mean, is it serving American interests? Is it serving Venezuelan or Latin American interests? What is the role of America, right? And, what are we going to do about it at this point going forward, So,
yeah, that seems like a good question. I think that is pretty masterful, and it seems like that is something that could easily be turned around today. The Republicans doing that to the Democrats in some way and making the Democrats look like fools, and that would be the norm, or what we would expect, and people wouldn't think much of it. But it seems like at least in this case, they've turned it around. And it's a good question. At least it's not ridiculous. Whatever he said, that's a ridiculous question. I don't think it's a ridiculous question. I think he should have to answer it and defend it and see what he has to say from there.
She went on and continued, Omar said, whether under your watch a genocide will take place and you will look the other way because American interests were being upheld is a fair question. Because the American people want to know that any time we engage in a country that we think about what our actions could be and how we believe our values are being furthered. Again, after downplaying her question, Abrams said, quote, the entire thrust of American policy in Venezuela is to support the Venezuelan people's effort to restore democracy to their country. And then in her final question, Omar asked Abrams whether American foreign policy prioritized upholding human rights and protecting people against genocide. And he said, quote, that is always the position of the United States. And, I've been particularly interested in what Representative Omar has had to say, because I don't know if you've been following, but she has really kicked up a huge firestorm here in the last couple of days via Twitter regarding, the big lobby and regarding our foreign policy towards certain countries.
Before you go on, I think I know what you're about to talk about, but I feel like should we wrap up with this Venezuela stuff before we...
Sure. I mean, Venezuela is the bigger issue over what Representative Ilhan Omar says. But I'm honestly have to admit that I'm not completely well versed into exactly what is going on there. But I know that, shit's going down, man.
Yeah, no, I think the only thing that it sounded, whatever the quote that you just read about this, what was his name? Abramson?
Elliot Abrams. Yeah, that's right.
Abrams, with his rebuttal. Does that sound? Was there any other reaction? And whatever you're reading from, does it say anything else about what people are saying, or in response to that guy's statement that the United States always? That seems to, is that the linchpin that people are disagreeing with? Or do you just want to reread that, if you could reread that quote about what the United States always has done, focusing on humanitarian and whatnot?
Yeah, well, Omar was grilling him, and he was basically responding by saying the entire thrust of American policy in Venezuela is to support the Venezuelan people's effort to restore democracy. And then she went and asked, what is American foreign policy inherently prioritizing, this upholding of human rights and protecting people against genocide? And he went and said that is always the position of the United States. Now, without knowing too much about the situation, obviously you're more of a history buff than I am, but, American history is obviously very complex. A lot of the times it's about ensuring our own, interests above other people, and, kind of expelling this idea of democracy for all in, very potentially controversial ways, right? So it's an interesting debate.
It is. And it's interesting to hear from her if she was insinuating or what that exact question was trying to elicit, whatever response from this guy. If it was just supposed to be like an obvious question that he would answer and say, yes, of course. It seemed that I don't understand how you could respond otherwise in that environment or setting, because to do otherwise is against what most Americans would say is the only reason for even considering interfering in another country's politics.
Well, and right now,
but as we know, I think that I'm sorry.
No, go on.
I was just going to say that's not always been the case in the past. For 40, 50 years, we were fighting the Cold War, and there were some priorities that came above other values, and we did interfere in other countries' politics. So maybe we're reckoning for that now. I don't know. But it doesn't seem good that this guy who has this, he doesn't seem to be, he does have a valid perspective because he was a part of a presidential administration that for 8 years helped chart the course of history in Latin America and end the Cold War with the Soviet Union. That's what Ronald Reagan did. He ended the Cold War. He wanted to end the Cold War, and he did end the Cold War. So that, but for a while there, he was fighting. For the entirety of his presidency, he was basically fighting the Cold War, and that involved Latin America in certain ways. So I'm not defending what he did in Nicaragua or El Salvador or whatever, but stuff happened in the Cold War that people in America right now would not tolerate, but that's what happens when history happens.
Yeah, that is what happens when history happens. And it's crazy, man, because right now we're getting into this, campaign and this debate and all that about what our role is in the world. And I think we kind of sparred on this a little bit last week, and, not to get all activist on you, but, this idea of kind of reinvesting the money we spend in these foreign adventurous wars, where we're, obviously you have the Iraqs, and you have Afghanistan, and you have Libya, and you have Syria. Like, what is the cost of war? What is the real reason for going into a foreign sovereign nation, invading and putting our own candidate or our own leader in place when, you can just offer whatever humanitarian aid that you can offer that helps in whatever way possible. And you save you're spending, instead of spending all that money on these wars, you can reinvest in domestic issues, infrastructure, healthcare, education. And like I said before, this is one of the reasons why I think we need a candidate that's going to say something like that, right? And whoever that's going to be, for me, I see Tulsi Gabbard as the only person who's saying it so far. A lot of these candidates, I don't know if they really believe in that. They believe in this liberal international order that we've talked about as well, but I don't know if it's kind of the dark side of that, though. There's a dark element to this, neoliberal kind of idea. It veers into this. Here's your horseshoe theory. It veers into neoconservatism, pretty smoothly a lot of the time. This is what Obama did with his continuing with a lot of the same nonsense that Bush was doing in the Middle East. He ramped up the drone war. I think Tulsi Gabbard might be a little bit. I don't know if she's great on the drones, but I think that one of the ideas I think that is going to be important for the Democratic Party is to reinvest all of this money we're spending on military in these foreign countries that, like Syria, it's like a dirty word. Like on MSNBC, they're like talking so much shit about, but why wouldn't we want to topple Assad? Like, why wouldn't we want to, go to war with him? It's like, Because like why? I mean, why would we though? It's like, is he a threat to the United States? This is the thing that is coming up in these, which it should come up with this candidate Gabbard. She's saying, why should we intervene when he's not a direct threat to us? I mean, she is kind of looking at it from an American domestic perspective. Let's reinvest this money that we'd be spending on, destabilizing these countries even more, and looking into building this nation more so the real humans on the ground here have better lives to live, as opposed to worrying about what the hell is going on in Syria.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between Syria and Venezuela, and there's a difference between going home, or there's a difference between wanting to stay out of the lives of other people and invest in America, and also doing what's right when it is required and is only possible that a country like the United States, or for something that the United States can achieve. For instance, the Yazidis or whatever in Iraq, that religious group that was on the verge of getting slaughtered by ISIS, and they were starving on a mountain in Iraq. And that was in a time when the United States could do something that was effective and made the difference in saving the lives of however many hundreds or thousands of those people. That is not always the case, and it's tricky to figure out when. I mean, that's one easy example, and then Iraq is probably the other extreme, where it just doesn't make any sense. But that's the difficulty, is sorting out within that spectrum when it is right and justified and intelligent for the United States to engage in interventionism with its military abroad. And I just think that there should be a little bit more of a acknowledgement that there is a difference between Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan and Venezuela. I'm not saying that Venezuela is a country that can just be invaded overnight like Grenada or some, what happened in the 80s. And but Russia is there. Russia has for all this interventionism or whatever, Russia has sent however many special whatever agents or elite combat fighters or whatever the hell they've done. And China is, I think, something like $15 billion they've invested, or Venezuela owes them. I don't know if that includes military assistance or whatnot, but it probably does to some degree. Cuba is spying on Venezuelans right now. So I'm not saying that America should invade there, but I think that America could use some of its weight to throw a little bit of pressure around and try to help, like they did with sending in this aid. It didn't get over, but it makes Maduro, either way, it's brilliant political ploy. Either way, he looks like an asshole. If he accepts the aid, he acknowledges that his country is starving. And if he doesn't, he's a humanitarian. He's committing crimes against humanity by not feeding his people. So makes him look like an idiot either way. And there's nothing wrong with what the United States did in this example. And I mean, what the rest is going to happen after this, I do not know, but it's fine. I think it's good to put a little bit of pressure on him. The rest of Latin America, I think, is with this dude. What's his name?
Who?
The guy, the Venezuelan, the challenger, who's declared himself the real president or the rightful president. Not sure. most people are behind this dude, except for like handful countries. Nicaragua is holding out. Russia, China, and a couple other places. I don't know.
Is that Guaido? Juan Guaido?
Yeah.
Well, it's a fascinating. It's going to be an interesting way forward for sure. And yeah, I like I said, I'm not as well read. I mean, now that I have this jacket, I suppose I should be more well read on Venezuela.
Dude, I think that it's great. I mean, it's, if nothing else, you're bringing attention to the subject, and it's an important subject. And if you're standing, like, look, Maduro should not be, as long as you are not defending Maduro, Venezuelan people, a winner in that jacket, as far as I'm concerned.
Sure. Well, it's also a great looking jacket. They do have a fantastic flag.
It is. You're a flagologist.
Yeah, that's what they call them. I don't know the significance of the flag, but it is nice. It's got a bit of the Colombian flair to it, a little bit of Ecuador, a little bit of Bolivia. They all have similar flags. Not sure why, but that's a cool thing, I think. Should look into the history of that.
Would you just, maybe for later, you can come back to it at some point, but if you want to, maybe I should Google what the Colombian or the Venezuelan flag, anyway.
Yeah, I don't think it's as. I mean, sure. Yeah, that could be how we end this podcast, I suppose, with a little bit of a vexillology, if you will. I'm fascinated by that, man, because it makes.
I respect that. I respect that.
Symbolism is important. Like, why do we have 13, red and white candy cane stripes? Well, big deal, man. 13 colonies. Like, why is there the number of stars on a navy blue sky? Like. It's excellent, man. Nobody really knows, I don't think, why those colors were chosen. I mean, the colors were chosen because it was like a remorphing, I guess, the Union Jack in our own way, I suppose, because that's our history. But it's great, man. Flags are beautiful. I love them.
Yeah, I mean, we argue about it, lest we forget the Supreme Court case that decided whether or not it was legal to burn the flag as a freedom of speech, and now we're arguing about it, whether or not professional athletes can kneel, when they're so. There's this debate that goes back, right? To your point, it's, if you're gonna argue about it, it's cool to know what some of the details of, I guess, the Star Spangled Banner is the equivalent today. So I don't know. There's a cool history probably behind that as well.
There is, that we won't repeat on this show right now, to bore our listeners, and B, because we don't know the whole history.
What does that mean about? Yeah, I've got bad taste.
What is that?
I've got bad taste in subject matter.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's because you just come on to the State of Everything and have nothing to offer to the State of Everything. You just sit there with your Coors Light and your mind full of non-existent ideas and ruin everything for everybody.
Question. Does the Venezuelan flag get included in every? Is the Venezuelan flag part of everything?
Of course it is. Like I said,
fair game.
Standing with the people of Venezuela, we got to stand with educate people on their flag. So, I might as well talk a little bit about the flag before we move on to the next topic here. It's a tricolor of yellow, blue, and red, dating to the original flag introduced in 1811. The Venezuelan War of Independence. There's 8 stars in the center. So the colors and symbolism. The yellow represents the riches of the country, the wealth of Venezuelan soil, gold, sovereignty, harmony, justice, and agriculture, as well as the sun, the source of light. Blue represents the Sea of the Caribbean that surrounds the country, as well as the Venezuelan beaches. And red represents the spilled blood in the Battle of Independence from Spain. So there you go. There you have it. And
that's cool.
That's what. Yeah, I mean,
When did they earn their independence from Spain?
1811.
1811.
That's the year.
That's
So
crazy. Cool.
shout out to all our Venezuelan listeners out there. You know, I know you guys. I know you guys love this show. I know we hear a lot from you guys out there down in Caracas. Love it. Thank you so much for checking us out. I hope you guys figure it out down there with. It's crazy, man. When you go to their Wikipedia, President Nicolas Maduro partially recognized, Juan Guaido partially recognized. It's pretty wild, man.
I mean, there are. That was an insane protest the other week. However many millions, maybe I think it was over 1 million people showed up at least. So that's crazy, and I think people are impatient and they're tired of starving.
Yeah.
So crazy. Yeah.
Well, then you have these campus reform YouTube channel guys that go out with the mic on, they talk to the Venezuelans that are living here in America, and they're like, talk to me about socialism and why it can never happen here. And they're like, yeah, like, people like Bernie Sanders, like, stay away. Like, people talk about the Nazis and people talk about whatever, but the socialists and communists are just the worst kinds of people, and like, stay away from any kind of socialism. And right now it's pretty weird because socialism is on the up and up in this country, if you will. I think obviously there's always the liberal trope that it's like, oh, it's not that socialism, or it's like, oh, hasn't real socialism hasn't been tried yet. But you do have people that are they brand themselves as such, and I think this is an issue for the Democratic Party. I think socialistic ideas and implementations are nothing new to the United States. However, I think it is a messaging issue, though. Like, if you're going to brand yourself as a socialist, I mean, even if you want like health care for all and education, tuition free public education, things that are achievable in our lifetimes, if you're going to brand yourself as a socialist, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, because a lot of America will just immediately just never vote for a socialist based on, this, the real world and real world concerns of what socialism has done to countries, but also just it's a branding issue where, looking at what are real solutions going forward. We're not saying the government's going to seize all of your property, but this, and kill business. But this Green New Deal, we're jumping around a lot, but this Green New Deal that just came out, it does veer into some really weird elements of what socialism actually is. And that is a concern for a lot of people. And I understand that. But I don't know. Do you have anything to say about the Green New Deal? Have you seen anything about that?
Partially. There was like a blog post that said something about guaranteeing jobs to people who are unable or unwilling to work, and that was immediately deleted. Which is not good press. And I know that Mitch McConnell is going to put this to a vote so that Democrats are on the record for it and will tear themselves apart in the 2020 primaries. That's the only reason it's going to vote right now, because Mitch McConnell sure as hell doesn't give a shit about doing anything about this. Anyway. But I guess my question, I'm interested in what you think, but hypothetical, counterfactual, I don't know, hypothetical. If there was another 2008 financial crisis, how would that change, or how would that affect your view of the danger of socialism? I mean, do you think it like afterwards or before, if there is another 2008 financial crisis or economic downturn that's really bad. I mean, maybe it doesn't need to be a financial crisis. Maybe it can be somewhere. I mean, that was pretty serious what that was. So if it's not as bad. But if the economy, I mean, people are this upset about the economy, and this is the second longest economic boom or growth, I think, since, I don't know, the last 50 years or something. So yeah, what would that change? How would that affect? I mean, what do you think? Like the fear of socialism, should we be scared of it now, or take it, or just, I don't know, or if if the economy sours and people get on both sides of the spectrum get angry about how unfair things clearly and obviously are, should we be scared of socialism, or would there something be on the right that would come out? I don't know.
Well, your boy, right? Your boy the other day, Mr. Tucker Carlson, whom you have a special affinity for, I know.
Well, I
He
mean,
was saying,
false.
what was he saying about market capitalism? He said market capitalism is not a religion, and how like maximizing shareholder value does not mean a fair and decent and cohesive country, right?
Yeah.
This
For
is
the record,
talking about, we're not talking about social. I mean, there are real socialists out there, but I think what we're kind of more standing for, like trying to get more towards, is it's not democratic socialism, because that is the, once again, like it's the socialism word. Let's get away from socialism. It's just like saying nationalism. Like we might be nationalists to a certain extent in some ways, but why even use that word, like you said, because it has such a bad connotation. I think a social democracy is probably the better branding, because I mean it's essentially the same thing, but it's uh, it's trying to tackle, you know, certain issues, you know, equity issues, with where things are going and what kind of income inequality and where the wealth is. And I mean, that's the corruption that I think we're talking about, that has been rotting away DC. And so look, it's all it's all going to come to a head at some point. I mean, it's, yeah, I don't socialism, man. I don't even know if we should talk about socialism. I think it should be an argument for like, how do we just survive? And if if you know, universal, if single payer healthcare is going to be a way for all of us to survive, if tuition free education is going to be a way, you know, for us to be, um, you know, not stupid. You know, these are kind of little incremental things. I don't know if there's a huge crash. I mean, the whole thing might collapse. You might just go towards Bitcoin at that point. I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, yeah.
yeah, I
What are your thoughts on that?
don't know. I have second thoughts about Bitcoin the last like year from what other people have said about it. But I don't know, man. Yeah, I think like here, I think there's a lot of fear mongering about a junior representative, freshman representative, however you say it, from New York, who's a Democratic socialist, who is good on social media and is attracting attracting a lot of attention herself, and also the GOP Republican Party loves to demonize her. And she has some. She has a lot of different ideas and stuff, but I don't see what the harm in is in discussing those ideas and um, working within a framework to take them into account and see what may or may not be good and valuable in them, while taking into account what conservatives their concerns are, which are probably valid about, you know, the realistic. This is a massive undertaking. She was talking about transforming every building in America in 10 years to make it fuel or solar or green, whatever that means. To make every building in America in 10 years, make it green, is an insane. There are bridges that are collapsing in this country. Chicago, a bridge, that's the city, I don't know, but like the infrastructure has been horrible for a while. So I mean, we've got our roads that we've got to pave, and airports, let alone. So I'm not saying that it shouldn't be done, but there needs to be, how is any of this going to be realistically done? I'm not saying only the conservatives are capable of having that argument, but typically in the past, conservatives have been the ones who are fiscally minded, who care about, or at least used to pledge allegiance to balanced budgets and giving a shit about the deficit. So, um, I don't know, somebody, I mean, if these things are going to happen, you need somebody to have the ideas, and it all kind of mixes together. Um,
Well,
and
this is why
yeah, I don't know.
conservatives continue, but
I,
this is why,
all I'm gonna say is we could discuss these things and hopefully make some move on the Green Deal and do something to try to address climate change, or else, I don't know, 30 years, we're all, everything's gonna, whatever. It's gonna be bad. But the other thing is that, like, if if we do, like, in terms of socialism specifically, this is one aspect of of the Green New Deal could be called socialism, and to a certain degree, I think it's, I wouldn't, certainly wouldn't phrase it at that. I don't think that it necessarily. I think that it's just a good modification of. It's just basically what America has done in the past, which is continued to modify and evolve its system to redistribute to a certain extent, becoming neither socialist or laissez-faire capitalist. We've done a good job of staying in between both, and we should continue to do both, or stay in between both of those extremes. And I think the danger is if you do not address these concerns, you do not pay attention to the people who are making valid complaints about income inequality, the deterioration of the environment, so on and so forth, then you start to get populist leaders and other demagogues and extremists who risk doing crazier things. And socialism is one of those crazy things. Just like an autocratic imbecile can just, wreak havoc across a country for 4 years. So both are possible. Either pay attention to it now or deal with it later, I guess, is what I would have to say.
it's got to be the right Green New Deal, though, right? And if this is going to be just, socialism draped in intersectionality, which is a lot of what it is, unfortunately, and that's what bums me out. It's like, if you're going to have a real Green New Deal that tackles, like, the real problems we have, more renewable energy, offsetting costs from whatever kind of, militaristic bullshit we're doing everywhere else, and implementing new technology for new infrastructure, green energy, new jobs, that's great. If you're going to address racial, inequality, also great. If you're going to, but if that's what's going to, there's this verbiage in this bill that it's a lot of that, though. It's a lot of this, like, gender pay equity and, guaranteeing economic, security for all, which it sounds good. You got to talk about jobs in energy, though, not intersectionality, and not like this weird social justice kind of thing, And I think that's what a lot of people have. They have a problem with that. When you say that you're going to reduce, calls for generating 100% of our nation's power from renewable sources within 10 years. I mean, I get that they're trying to just do big things, but that's ridiculous. It's not going to happen in 10 years. Eliminating air travel for high-speed rail. Are you kidding me? Like, they're literally eliminating high-speed rail in California now. They're not going to do the bullet train from San Francisco to Los Angeles. Talking about farting cows, right? So, these are all important things, but it's got to be done the right way. And I feel like there's a lot off with, obviously, her messaging. And, when you say that you're going to transform every building in America, I mean, conservatives hear that and they're like, oh my God, like, the government's going to be like in my house. They're going to be like, they're going to be changed. They don't want the U.S. government's grubby fingers everywhere in their lives, right? They want less of that. And so when you talk about more of that, it's going to scare a lot of people away, especially when it's such a high profile and expensive thing. So there is this Bloomberg opinion article here that says the Green New Deal would spend the U.S. into oblivion. The environmental parts of the plan would be costly but manageable. The environmental parts. We're talking about the environment. This should be an environmental bill. But it says the same can't be said of its social programs. So a lot of what this seems to be is like this weird social program welfare state kind of bill that is being masked as an environmental bill, right? And obviously the two are linked, but they're not the same thing. And so this article goes on to say, you know, about how there was that frequently asked questions bit that was shared that was just absolutely ridiculous, where it said things like, quote, economic security to all those who are unable or unwilling to work. You know, that's kind of insane, right? So let's start with the good ideas in the plan, right? It says in this article that the Green New Deal would retrofit all American buildings and factories to be carbon neutral, electrify all transportation, switch the entire electrical grid to carbon neutral energy sources. The goals are highly ambitious, but they're good targets. Ocasio-Cortez's plan correctly recognizes that carbon taxes wouldn't be enough to prompt private companies to do all these things on their own, and that large-scale government-funded infrastructure is required. Furthermore, a focus on scaling up clean energy would push the technology forward. That would help other countries where most of the world's carbon emissions are produced to follow in the U.S.'s footsteps. But the environmental policies, as sweeping as they would not be the most costly items on the list. You know, this plan combines a federal job guarantee, free college, single-payer health care. This is all in one bill under this environmental bill, right? Aren't these like all separate things? I know they're related, but maybe we should tackle each of these individually. This is my opinion. I'm injecting. And now the article continues. You know, how much would these proposals cost? It's hard to know. Senator Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All proposal was predicted to cost about $3.2 trillion a year. Switching to renewable energy would conservatively cost more than $400 billion annually. Even though the cost is coming down as technology improves, net zero emissions retrofits of every building in the country would be expensive. Optimistically, perhaps $88,000 for a townhouse and presumably much more for freestanding homes. Then it goes into kind of like, what would we have universal basic income? I mean, there's a lot of this is like very pie in the sky ideas that could be good ideas going forward. But in this polarized climate that we're in right now, throwing literal socialism and all of this at, you know, everybody, when there's so many people skeptical of what the left's intentions are, I feel like this is not the right move. I feel like we have to just, let's focus on what kind of renewable energy, you know, things we can tackle immediately that aren't going to just run up, you know, the budget.
I will give you an example. I literally just thought of this in the last 3 seconds of what you were saying. So Reagan is, I'm going to bring everything back to Reagan. Reagan is thought of as deregulation happened on his watch, when actually the end of the Carter administration, they deregulated like railways, the airline industry, and a couple other different things, and it was massive and led to a lot of profits, and it was necessary. But nonetheless, Reagan came in, won the election. That was his advocating, what he was advocating for. His problem was that he did not distinguish between deregulating. It just was deregulation across the board. He kind of didn't care about keeping certain things in check so that government ethics had a role to play. It didn't matter. Regulations were all that. When things started being just lopped off that were not good and people didn't like, people started getting upset and then reacted to that deregulation, and the door closed. People were like, this is, I mean, he could have done it in a smart way where, you know, it wasn't done as political favors or what businesses and whatever industry, OSHA and everything else, that he could have done it in a different way, a more reasonable, rational, data-driven way to study the issues of deregulation, potentially cut back and save and whatever, make more sense. So my whole point in saying this is that was the end. After the 80s and 90s, just that kind of lost its. These people still talk about it, and Trump had something for every regulation they dropped to, and it didn't. That was a motivating issue in the 1980 election, and it was a big deal, and it it became an element of the Republican Party thereafter. So my whole point is that if I think if the Democrats go a little bit too far and mess up, or just it doesn't get executed well with this Green New Deal, then they risk having people close their minds to trying to improve some things. I think that's what you're trying to describe. Is my general sense is that the country is like, we need to do some change and things need to improve here a little bit, but they're, like you said, untrustworthy of the Democrats. And yeah, I think people are coming around to global warming, climate change, but I think the better, it's just two different strategies. Do it all at once, because you're afraid that it's not going to get passed. You're not going to be able to pass other things. If maybe you can get the Green New Deal, but you can't get universal health care or something else. So do it all together. I don't think that that's probably the way to do it, because it's just really complicated to do everything. The government's going to, I don't know. I think my strategy would be, like you said, to build a movement, pick something strategically that's likely to succeed, do it well, execute on it, and get people to believe that progress is possible in this country, one way or the other. I don't know.
The problem is, though, Republicans won't. None of them are going to say this is like a thing that matters. And I think if you made it relatable to everyone, and people are just going to see that the Ocasio-Cortez is the one spearheading this, and she literally was quoted last year or the year before saying that in 12 years, if we do nothing, then we won't have a world to live in. Like, we're all going to die in literally 12 years. Like, there was a clip I saw on Steven Crowder's show, and they just kept showing that, and I was like, oh my God, like, this is the person who's crafting this. It's kind of not very, there are issues with her messaging as well, and her gaffes and all that. But there's another article here in the Bloomberg right below that. It's about how to redesign a Green New Deal that isn't over the top. And it goes into saying, this is like what an alternative Green New Deal could be. Focusing on green technology, finding cheap ways of manufacturing cement and concrete without carbon emissions, reducing emissions from agriculture, giving developing countries a way to reducing carbon output without threatening their economic growth. To this end, the U.S. should pour money into research. The second way would be to move green technology forward. The second way to move green technology forward would be to encourage the scaling of these technologies. As companies build more solar power, batteries, smart grids, low carbon building retrofit kits, and other green technologies, the costs go down. To that end, the government should provide large subsidies to green energy companies, including solar power, batteries, and electric cars, as well as mandating the replacement of fossil fuel plants with zero carbon plants. Infrastructure spending is also important. The original Green New Deal's goal of building a smart electrical grid is a good one, as is the idea to retrofit American buildings to have net zero emissions. It also goes into saying it should provide incentives for higher density in urban areas, since sprawl contributes to emissions. So yeah, I mean, I'm basically out of my league in terms of all of this verbiage here. But I think creating green jobs is immensely important. I think that's what it all comes down to, is, providing the infrastructure and the projects that are going to create these jobs, and, helping low income people without, I think the social justice elements of this bill are a lot of what people are on the right are talking about with what they have a problem with. They're saying that it's socialist, and they're saying that it's just a social justice warrior's fantasy. And I want to move more away from that and more about, like, what are real world issues? What are real world ways we can, make the world more livable, make it cleaner, make it more green? How do we kind of implement this renewable energy to our advantage? Like, I mean, I don't own a house, but when I do buy property eventually, I'm going to want that shit retrofitted, man. Like, solar panels on the roof, like, that shit's going to be completely green, man. Because, like, And it's hard to force people to do that because, I mean, it does require a huge transformation, you know, but
It's, I mean, yeah, I think that it's has part of it is internal motivation, and but also at a certain point, it's hard to predict what's going to be the real motivator that gets this stuff done. You know, people are talking about Miami. Sound like Trump. Everyone's talking about it. People are talking about it, but I don't know what. Miami seems to be the greatest. Miami and New Orleans are the biggest cities at risk for climate change in terms of rising sea levels and the hurricanes for New Orleans. The fires in California are happening more frequently. So certain regions, everyone, I don't know, it's going to shake out differently with which country or which regions of the country have to deal with what. But just like how school shootings has become an issue ever since Columbine, you know, I think that maybe global warming might be like that, where all of a sudden it just becomes impossible to ignore. And hopefully at that point it's not too late. But before that, I think that any level of effort and experimentation is good, and anything that's done on a large scale needs to be made sure that it is effective and it's accountable. If multinational corporations can pull off insane things logistically, then the United States, I mean, the United States government is the largest organization on planet Earth. So let's just, I think that the United States federal government is like the largest organization. I think that's the case. So it's hard to execute things, but at the same time, if we're entrusting the government to use our tax dollars well, it's up to us to have it be done well so that future changes can continue to take place and we can continue to address these issues. So, I don't know. Yeah, stuff needs to get done, but it shouldn't get messed up.
it's crazy. The thing is, it's so radical. Like it's so radical, man. I mean, so much needs to change for us to like ensure, you know, being able to live happy, healthy lives forever. I don't know. And if you have rampant capitalism, you know, which we don't have, I guess. I mean, we do have regulations, but you have to have the right leaders that are in place that are going to be tackling issues, and you have to first acknowledge that the issue exists, and a lot of people don't acknowledge that it exists. I think, you know, I think it's slowly changing. I think a lot of these conservatives just say that. I think deep down they know there is something going on, but it's just easier just to like shit on whatever Democrats say and just to challenge them and just to live in their own box. I think the next generation coming up is more woke, if you will, to environmental issues, but it's got to be packaged in a way that makes sense to all people and isn't going to be just like, all right, we're a socialist country now. You know, we're going to have eco-socialism and environmental racism is a problem. And it's like, well, that sounds insane to a lot of people, you know?
America is not a socialist country. It's never going to be one. If it's just it's dumb argument. America can't. We've already settled that socialism doesn't work. Okay, it shouldn't even, as far as I mean, it can be part of the conversation, more dialogue. Let's debate over it, but socialism is dead. That has been established. It doesn't work. Look at North Korea. Look at Venezuela. I mean, it's just it's whatever. I'm going to say this quote here, and it's by Milton Friedman, who was one of the most celebrated economists of the 20th century, American economists, who was a free market, diehard free market. So love him or hate him. he has a quote. Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around. That is our basic function. To develop alternatives to existing policies, to keep them alive and available until the politically impossible becomes politically inevitable. And he was one of the most important economic advisors for Ronald Reagan, who came in and Reaganomics, the Reagan Revolution, whatever, the gospel that we all live and celebrate today. But at that beforehand, that wasn't the case. So he was part of, there was a crisis, and he helped provide a solution to that crisis. And I think that there's a crisis going on right now, and it's slow burning. I don't think we're gonna have a full reckoning until the Mueller report comes out. But at that point, afterwards, it's up to us and for people to just start having these ideas. And if the Green New Deal is part of it, then good. We'll all talk and discuss it and sort out what needs to be done.
Go plant-based, go vegan, everybody. All right. I'm not, it'd be a good idea, but I don't know if it'd be good for your health. I think everybody's different. I'm not vegan, but I think it would be probably good for me if I ate more plant-based. And I think that everybody has different, different systems that are different. You respond to different lifestyle choices.
Future listeners of the future, buy lab-grown meats. They're probably fine. They probably taste can't be any worse than like McDonald's, and cows didn't fart out methane to produce that. So maybe, but will I listen to myself? Will I listen to this in the future? Will I listen to my own advice 10 years from now? That's the question. Stay tuned.
AI bots, if you're listening, please make us the best lab-grown meat that is printed out of your best 3D printer, Mr. AI Overlord, that I love so much. Thank you for giving us the best lab-grown meat ever. I know you're going to sponsor this show in the future because you guys love the state of everything. So thank you so much, AI bot, Overlord. You're the best. And thank you for giving us the best quality.
We love you
so much. Can we talk about another crisis now that's been brewing that I've had on my mind that just really pisses me off? And it just gets to the point, the core of corruption in DC and free speech and the right to criticize whoever you want to criticize. To me, this is an important issue. So going back to Ilhan Omar, on Twitter, she called out let me just get back to I have some info here. So she basically is facing backlash for a tweet that was saying it was critical of the pro-Israel lobby. And everyone's now saying that she's an anti-Semite. Now, maybe she is, maybe she isn't. But the idea that criticizing a foreign government and the lobby power that it has over our Congress, if that is immediately smeared as hate speech, especially when you are a woman of color, she's a Muslim, Somalian refugee immigrant, and now for the rest of her career, she will be she's going to be labeled as someone who hates Jews by saying that the Israel lobby has too much control over our Congress. And people like Sheldon Adelman, who is the biggest GOP donor, and we're supporting a right-wing government in Israel who is incredibly controversial for a lot of reasons. Their treatment of Palestinians. Some people call it an apartheid state. I'm not saying that, but that's what people say. And so people are calling for her to resign now. Representative Omar, who we were talking about earlier, freshman representative, and people are smearing her as an anti-Semite because who did she offend? She offended billionaire APAC donors. Why is APAC untouchable? Like, why are they the sensitive snowflakes now? Or because now we can't criticize anything about where our money is going, or what kind of influence, foreign governments have over Americans? To me, the whole thing is ridiculous, and it got me really angry. What do you think?
I kind of stood by, obviously passive on this. I did not partake in any debates about this, and I didn't really read any articles. I most have heard this through word of mouth through you and a couple other friends. And I, in short, agree with you. I mean, to me, it just seems like a minor issue. The president and there's just been a lot of instances of demonstrable anti-Semitic comments made from the president. So anything that Trump or Pence says are just, they're hypocrites, and it doesn't, I don't take that at face value. And then
we're not talking about them. We're talking about a representative, someone in Congress, talking about
and exactly that's
a position against a foreign country that has violated human rights, essentially, and has an outsized influence on American politics.
So I guess I just wanted to take that off the table. What I'm saying about Trump, all the criticism, I think it's you're exactly right, but that I just wanted to address that. And that is the problem, is when you say, well, the other side, they're all terrible, so they can't criticize us and we can just keep doing it. I mean,
let's be clear. Anti-Semitism is bad. I think that is a horrible thing, and it's deplorable.
Exactly.
It's the worst.
Exactly. I'm taking a long time to get to
Sure. Continue. Sorry. I just want to make sure our listeners know that this is my point. There is a huge difference between not being pro-Israeli government, that the state, pro what they're doing in Israel, and being against Jewish people.
I guess I should say that, what I should have said is that what Republicans have said is equally, if this is supposedly anti-Semitism, then the Republicans have committed it just the same, if not worse.
Both. The Democrats are saying it too. Pelosi is calling her out.
I think that this, I think that if people can't criticize AIPAC, if that's the issue, that if we can't criticize AIPAC and the influence that anybody, I mean, if you substituted AIPAC for the NPR or for the NRA and said, it's all about the Benjamins, would that change things? I mean, does it, or is it this? I mean, would it be a non-issue if you said, the Koch Foundation, it's all about the Benjamins with the Koch industries and how they fund everything in the Republican Party, or what, it's all about the Benjamins for the unions that donate for the Democrats.
It is all about the Benjamins.
It is. I mean, our politics, this was each of the elections of, so I think that if you can't criticize a lobbying nonprofit that's, is it religious or is it political? Or is it, people have to figure that out for themselves, or maybe, I don't know. I think that if they're engaging in politics and spending a lot of money to influence politics, then they should be open to criticism, just like any other large or body that carries financial weight to influence politics. I think that should be taken into consideration, and not just be, generalized and demonized for just across the board without, I don't see, I kind of see it as, I think that it's like, this is why it's a salient issue in this country, is because people do not like it. AOC had her YouTube or Twitter moment there when she walked through her whole thing about how people can accept a bunch of money and then turn around and make laws, and just how corrupt politics is with campaign finance, and it went through all the internet, and that's because people are paying attention to it, and it's starting to open up and become an issue. So this one kind of hits right in the center of that, and I think some people are interpreting this as a campaign finance issue, and some people are interpreting this as a religious
hate speech.
issue.
But it's so absurd because we can call out the NRA, we can call out the influence of Wall Street, we can call out big pharma, big oil, but the Israel lobby has bipartisan support, and you're smeared as an anti-Semite when you say that there's corruption by having too much money in politics, and they're funding the GOP and Netanyahu, their buddy. This is bad. Why is this an okay thing? This is not okay. We should be able to say that this is insane. And she basically proved her point. She proved that the government and the media they would put the economy of a foreign nation above the First Amendment right of a American citizen, a Muslim, right? You can't. I mean, she's a representative in Minnesota. You're not called Islamophobic for calling out outside Saudi influence in American politics, but you're called an anti-Semite for saying the Israel lobby is insane. There is a huge double standard here, and to me it really makes me angry because I see it as a free speech, a First Amendment issue. And to say that she's an anti-Semite, to say that she's anti-Jewish, am I against Jews by saying that I don't want us to be friends with the Israeli government like the way we are? It's insane to me.
Yeah, no, it's your free speech. I mean, I don't think it's a free speech issue. I think she can say it. People are going to criticize her. People can criticize her for it.
They want her to resign. They want her to resign for saying it's all about the Benjamin.
Well, I mean that has to do with, that's being accountable on ethics. I mean, that's why people have been saying, Donald Trump should have stepped down after however 8 women accused him of 9 women accused him of sexual assault or whatever. It's just accountability and credibility issues there. It's not so much free speech. You can still say it, but your comparison to Saudi Arabian, money, I agree. I don't really know what else to say. I mean, I think that it's, yeah, I really don't know what else to say. I think that you pretty much hit the nail on the head with.
There's a Chris Hayes tweet. He said, quote, "I really don't think the Democratic establishment, AIPAC, and others have quite grasped just how much they are losing and how they and have lost wide swaths of the Democratic Party base. In this age, with Trump as president, it is very, very hard to point at the Netanyahu government and say to liberals, quote, we need to support that government with everything we have. AIPAC runs the risk of going the way of the NRA if things continue this way. It will be very interesting to see how this plays out in the presidential primary." I thought that was an interesting look from Chris Hayes on MSNBC. I just think it's ridiculous when you can't. I mean, there's so much ridiculous about it. There's so many things, but to me, it's also a humanitarian position to call out what the actions of the Israeli government. It's the United Nations position to say that they're committing state violence, in Israel against an entire group of people, the Palestinians. This is not anti-Semitism at all. There are Jews in this country, American Jews, that say the same exact thing. Are they anti-Semitic for saying that? Of course not. It's a factual thing. When you have Sheldon Adelson, the GOP's biggest donor, if you can't call that out, then to me, it's insane. It's an insane smear, and it's not fair to her or anyone.
I think Israel is facing a very hard situation, just like the United States is facing their own crises, and same with the UK and other countries. Everyone's got their own shit they got to deal with, but Israel has to decide whether or not it's going to be Jewish, democratic and its own state. I think sovereign state. I forget. I'm tired, man. But I
It's
think
late over there, Chi-Town.
those are like it can't be all of these three things. And I feel like I'm gonna listen to this and tell myself I sound like an idiot, but
Yeah.
it's you right now. Israel is having a hard time being democratic um, and Jewish because it can't extend. It hasn't squared the circle of Palestinians, and it has to come to that come to come to that point at some point to figure out um, what's going to be happening, with the Gaza Strip. And I don't know. I'm not entirely educated with all of that, but yeah, there are some real challenges there. And I think that some of they're just receiving higher scrutiny right now, just like the United States is after some of the mistakes that it did in the Middle East. Israel is receiving some of that too, and I think some of it's justified. But it should be taken into account. And not everything can't all be anti-Semitism. What is actually anti-Semitism should be anti-Semitism, which
And
is obvious
that's
and easy for me to say that. But at the same time, too, like you gotta be able to criticize a government for what it's done and use like facts and just causal analysis to I don't know, make an effective argument. Like it's not all what this APAC in this example. APAC does run the risk of um, tying itself too closely to Trump and the Republicans and basically being the same as the NRA. I feel like
it diminishes real, very worrying and troublesome anti-Semitism that is going on right now, and that's the problem. That's a huge problem because there are real issues with that, and criticizing a pro-Israel lobby is about as far from anti-Semitism as you can have when you actually consider the real issues that are going on with that. And
people
yeah,
people are blowing up synagogues.
yeah,
That is real anti-Semitism.
yeah. And part of her job, Rep. Omar going in, was to root out corruption in politics and money in politics and big lobbies and big donors, and that's her job. And now she's been smeared from both parties. Pelosi, AOC is coming out and saying, "Oh, well, she learned it was, it's like," and then she apologizes. And I mean, I understand that, but it's like, it's absurd that no one defended her in this. You turn on all of every bit of corporate media is like, just all they say is that, yeah, she said anti-Semitism remarks and it's bad, and she's gonna have to learn from this or resign. And it's like, no, the real progressives, the left, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, people like you and me understand that this is this is an issue that we need to focus on.
Yeah, well, I mean, this will be old news in 4 days. So, but yeah, I think that I don't know. I think it's kind of the Republicans. That what Trump said. That she should resign. I don't how can you interpret that in any other way but just laugh at it. I mean, all of the things that he said. It's just like I don't anything that's coming from the right. It seems like they've just cooked it up in this faux outrage that that's why I guess I started my whole thing saying about Republicans accusing this and that because I correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it started out probably as criticism from the right saying, how could you do this? And it's like, well, clearly this is, I mean, obviously this is how it works. The Republicans bitch about the Democrats and Democrats bitch about the Republicans. So that's why I guess I didn't pay attention to it, because it was like, well, obviously they're going to say that and they have no ground to stand on, because clearly they don't, they don't care. They don't care. Really, they don't. The Trump supporters don't care about anti-Semitism. The guy tweeted out a Star of David with Hillary Clinton and a bunch of money and corruption. Like, they don't care.
Yeah.
They also, with Trump, with Charleston saying, both sides, they don't care about the right. Maybe parts
Evangelicals do. I mean, there's two separate. There's
parts of the right do, but
massively. They're really close with Israel. A lot of the right.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, is that, like, but they somehow, like, voted for this dude who. So, yes, anti-Semitism is a problem and everything, but who does this serve, and how much attention does this deserve? I think it's.
Yeah, you have to remember, though, his son-in-law is Jared Kushner and his daughter is Jewish. Ivanka's a Jew. So, I mean, it's not like, it's a very complex issue, man, with the Trumps in Israel.
But Donald Trump is not Jewish.
And he's best friends with Bibi, his boy Netanyahu. They're close.
Yeah. But
they're both right-wing assholes.
Donald Trump is loyal to like, his interests are to himself. He's close to Jared Kushner, but Jared Kushner is Jewish and Donald Trump is not Jewish. And how much Donald Trump actually gives a shit about his daughter being Jewish and Jared Kushner being Jewish.
His policy. There's a big influence in his policy towards Israel, for sure.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm too just black and white here, but yeah, Donald Trump caring only about Donald Trump, to me, that has been probably the most accurate. I don't know. That's just what I think. Donald Trump cares about Donald Trump.
Well, you're not wrong about that. All right. I think we should wrap it up here.
Sounds like a plan.
You got a closing statement out in Chicago?
Gonna miss Chicago. I'll be back at some point.
Gonna miss Chicago. That's what you sounded like. This is your last show from Chicago?
Hopefully the internet is better in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Is this your last show broadcasting from Chicago?
I'm not going to say last, but at this point, for the foreseeable future, I do not know when I will be back.
But for now, though, next week you'll be in Massachusetts.
Yes.
Well, we look forward to it. You won't be have a hostage kind of setting over there, hopefully. So.
Am I a hostage?
Yeah, that brick wall is really intimidating.
I thought it was industrial. I'm going for industrial. Right?
Okay, modern, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever the kids are calling it. All right, man.
Do you have anything to say?
Just, I still stand with the people of Venezuela. I'm hoping everything goes well. I stand with truth. I stand with honor. I stand with trying to say the right thing, and if you don't, trying to do the right thing. I don't know.
I guess my send off will be in honor of finishing that book on Reagan. Reagan believed nothing was impossible, and actually, you know what? Y'all deserve this quote. I deserve it.
I'll wear my Reagan hat for this bit.
Yes, listen, damn. So maybe, I guess, you know what? I'm gonna say maybe a couple of quotes. I'm just gonna say two quotes.
Yeehaw.
So Reagan, whatever. I can't find it. Reagan literally thought nothing was impossible, and what human beings were capable of achieving. I'll find it out. But it isn't his. So I guess I do want to find this first. I'm sorry.
Take your time, bro.
I'm fading here.
Yo, just a quick shout. You can find us if you're watching on YouTube. You can find us on the Spotify, on the Anchor, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Just in case you don't want to look at our pretty faces for an hour plus.
So Reagan never ceased to marvel at his own country, which experience at time was a land of opportunity in which neither inherited wealth nor prestigious education was prerequisite for success. And he says, to me, our country is a living, breathing presence, unimpressed by what others say is impossible, proud of its own success, generous, yes, and naive, sometimes wrong, never mean, and always impatient to provide a better life for its people in a framework of basic fairness and freedom. That's what he said at his campaign launch. And when he left office, he said, I never thought it was my style or the words I used that made a difference. It was the content. I wasn't a great communicator, but I communicated great things, and they didn't spring full bloom from my brow. They came from the heart of a great nation, from our experience, our wisdom, and our belief in the principles that have guided us for 2 centuries. They called it the Reagan Revolution. Well, I'll accept that. But for me, it always seemed more like the Great Rediscovery, a rediscovery of our values and our common sense. America right now is in the process of rediscovery.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love that this guy was an actor. It really shows in his verbiage. Beautiful, beautiful man.
The presidency was the role of a lifetime. He believed that he was meant to become president of the United States, and maybe he was. It was the role of his lifetime, and he executed. Not perfectly.
Who's perfect?
Good job.
Well, appreciate it. You want to plug that book? What's the book if you want to let our listeners know what that is?
Nobody is going to read it. But it's called President Reagan, The Role of a Lifetime.
What it's called. Wonderful. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, best of luck on your move towards the eastward locale. And I guess we'll catch you next week then, huh? If it all works out.
All right, sounds good. See you later. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Let's go, America. You got this. Keep it real, bro. America. Yeah. Let's do this. It'll be fine. Just it's gonna be all right. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about a thing. It's gonna be okay. Just keep your fingers crossed and just pray it away.